Hello, everyone. How are you? It's Lacey Delane here, along with the wonderful and amazing
So
Rhea.
sorry. Sorry, Lacey. Hello.
We are live for our first time ever on YouTube. That's pretty cool.
Very cool. We're excited.
Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
nervous, but excited, right?
A little nervous. We were talking in the before you go live room, like, whoa, we're all a little nervous, but it's fun. We're here because we want to interact with you guys. So welcome. Thank you for being here. And we hope to hear your thoughts today about what's going on in the world, which obviously we know there's a lot going on. And also, we want to share ways that we think might be cool for us to rethink our humanity, rethink the way we do society, re-envision or the way we envision an ideal society. So that's something we kind of wanted to talk about tonight. We have some ideas of our own, but we want to hear from you because we can only get better and stronger when we hear from other people. So we hope to see your little comments pop up. We have the awesome and the amazing Victor behind the scenes. He's going to take care of all those comments and everything and getting those things on the screen. So we're happy to have him.
Oh, yeah, I know. I want to just shout out to Victor. He's been so supportive of us, and he does an awesome job on the technical side.
Yes, that's the side that I don't want to. I mean, I could, but I just don't want to deal with it. So, anyway, Sonia, it is Friday. What is today? June the 6th?
June 5th. It's June 5th.
Yeah. What's going on? How are you?
Wow. There's so much going on, right? Because it's a 24-hour news cycle with all the events, all the protests. Yeah, I kind of go back and forth between wanting to know all the details of what's happening and then kind of needing to shut down, kind of not be overwhelmed by it. But honestly, I think that this is very powerful. I believe that we're moving in the right direction, even though I know there's been violence and looting. I feel it that there's change coming, and I support that. I support that change is on its way.
I've heard quite a few people say that, actually, and quite a few, like I believe I saw on Twitter Obama saying he feels that there's a change in the air. How can you talk about that a little bit more? I mean, kind of what makes you feel different?
Okay, I'm going to tell you a couple personal things. One is I made a decision that I wanted to order some books for family and friends, specifically regarding racism and of that nature, those kind of titles. And some of them, I can even tell the audience, I'm sure that they have heard of some of them or are curious to know. But when I called our local bookstore here, the guy told me they are sold out. Every single title that I listed is sold out, and they are publishing as fast as they can. So that's encouraging because I think people, they want to know. They want to know what's going on, and they want to educate themselves. I'm not saying that's the magic solution, but I think we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to tell you that I heard today was from a journalist I was hearing, I forget which radio station. They were talking about these protests and the marches, and he's been covering them for years. And he said a real difference is that in the past, on the Black Lives Matter marches, the majority would be Black, people, African-American people. And he said now it's like 50%.
Wow.
Of the races. I think that's huge.
That is. I mean, that is definitely something that I have noticed in watching the news coverage, seeing the protests across the country. There's a variety of races who are attending these things. And I would be at more. I haven't been at any. I would be at some. But if it wasn't for COVID, I think I'm just being extra careful at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very encouraged by how many people, white people, Latino, like all over the spectrum, not just Black people. And rightfully so, because we've talked about this before, Sonia, but this is not just a problem for the African-American community. This is not just their problem. This is all of our problem. We all hurt when any one of us are oppressed and any one of us are abused and taken advantage of and not heard.
No, I agree. And I think on our podcast, I believe I've mentioned that I believe we're all collective. There's this collective society in one. And that reality, I think COVID has opened us up to say, hey, what happens on one side of the world is going to affect us. And so there's this interdependence with all of us. And until we actually not only just hear those words, but live those words on a everyday basis, then things can't change. And what's happening is I know people are saying, I'm done. We need a different way of living.
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to retweet my little thing about us being live. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
We're live right now.
Yeah.
But
I will, while you're doing that, I was going to just name a couple books that I was looking at. One is White Rage, The Unspoken Truth by Carol Anderson. The Fire This Time by Jessamine Ward. Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. And Between the World and Me that I brought up, I think, on a previous podcast by Ta-Nehisi Coates. There's so many. There's just...
That's the one that Barrington mentioned, right?
Yeah, when we were on the previous podcast.
Cool.
So there's a lot of good information out there that, and along those lines, I was thinking about something is that we need to actually even rewrite our history, right? The history that we've learned is not accurate. And that's something that, bless you.
What a great thing for a live stream. Thank you.
It's authentic.
COVID went everywhere just now. Kidding. Totally kidding. Yes, it is authentic. What did you say? We need to rewrite our history, right?
History. Yes, the history that we learned in school is not the history that the true history. I mean, we could go even back to the Native Americans. So I think that's, I know that one of the themes that we're going to be talking about here is ways that we envision our ideal society.
Yes.
And that was one thing I thought about is definitely our education system, because that influences who you're going to be as you develop and, grow up and live your life.
It's true. And as someone who has participated in that as a teacher, as an educator, I would say there's certainly a lot that we can do to improve the system and really make it one where kids are empowered to be creative and to be critical thinkers, because we need that right now as we continue to go forward into the future. Things are going to keep changing at a very rapid pace. We need kids that are not trained for a specific role or one particular way to think, but able to problem solve. And that's going to be a hugely important skill, if not probably the most vital skill that kids will need as we move forward into the future.
Right. And I think it also, when we think of leadership, that we need to imagine leaders that are willing to have a team of people around them, not one individual. And we need multiple leaders, not one person, because everyone brings a different skill set and a background. And until we accept that, this person may know more than me, or this person may have a better idea than me, then that's going to create a better society. If it's going to be one individual, that's a problem. I don't care who it is. That doesn't work.
Yes. We talked about this a little bit on our last episode. If you have not listened, we'd love to have you listen to our podcast, Rethinking Humanity. It's on anchor.fm/Rethinking Humanity. Also on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Breaker, soon to be on Apple Podcasts. So take a listen. But we talked about the idea of authority and rational authority. Thank you, Victor. There you go. Anchor.fm/Rethinking Humanity. That's it. So we talked about authority and the differences between, being an authority, having authority, and also how primitive societies lived and how they had leadership, how leadership worked in their time. And I think it's so, in general, primitive societies are very, very intriguing to me, because I think, generally speaking, they did a better job of just valuing face-to-face.
And some of them are more advanced than we are.
Yes, yes. As much as we have a lot of technology, maybe they were more advanced than we are, So anyway, but I don't know if you want to talk any about the authority and kind of different people rising at different moments.
Right. I think the other point we could hit on here with authority is that one of the things we're seeing a clash is of authority, for instance, the police. And what kind of authority did they hold? And the fact that that is going to need to be re-examined and also be taught different ways of dealing with people. On one hand, you want, I guess, a certain degree of protection. On another one, you don't want this authority that completely has no, barriers to act when they feel they need to act. I mean, we're going to see, I think, a lot of changes in that area. Definitely. And I think that speaks to also, we can tie that into mental health. Those individuals need to be trained in mental health.
Yeah.
And as you and I have talked about before, they're not. That's a problem in our society.
It is. And I think it's very naive of us to think that there's a difference. Well, that you can separate mental health from physical, emotional. They all tie together. They all go hand in hand. And to the extent that we ignore one, we're ignoring all of them. And so this is something that's going to have to take its rightful place again. Well, again, I don't know if this is the right word, but it's going to have to take its rightful place, mental health, emotional well-being in our society, in our value system. One of the reasons I loved Andrew Yang so much and still love Andrew Yang so much, but I love his platform was, he was talking about making us a more human-centered, he said, economy. I would say a more human-centered society all the way around. The economy is obviously a huge part of our society, maybe foundational part of it, but we need it in every area. So we need to value our mental health. And let's go take it a step further. We can say, yeah, mental health is valuable, but if we don't understand it, that doesn't really do much good,
Yeah, and to your point, I think a lot of things that have occurred is very dehumanizing. We're living in a world that we separate the person from, say, what, the value we think that individual has. And I think that sets up a big problem for authority, because if you don't see the person as a human being, then it's much easier to act as if they're a thing.
That's such a great point.
Yeah.
This is why I hang out with you. You know that?
This is why we're talking today.
This is why I chose Sonia to do a podcast.
But gosh knows this is an evolution. We're in this process of, I don't know what the answers are, but we as a society have to work towards that. It can't be status quo, and we can't just accept, well, this is the way things have always been done. And that's what you're seeing now. There's this complete, breaking of the norms and of the status quo, saying, we're done. We need something else.
And I honestly think, we've talked about this before, but we needed that. We need that. Oh. And to the extent that we can salvage the damage from even COVID. I hate that we have a pandemic. I hate that there are people dying, and that's not the way we would want to see change come about. But I do believe that all of these things are working together to create a situation where we got to make some changes.
Yeah. And I think if you think of life in general, when there has to be a breakdown of things, right? If you think of your own life, a lot of times it is very painful, and there's a rupture of kind of what like your past. And then to be able to, not to get too prophetic here, but like to be born anew, there's got to be that death. There's a death first to be able to create something else. And I believe that's what's happening now. It is. And there's loss, and there's sadness, and there's rage, but it has to happen.
Yeah, it's a part of life. Loss is a part of the life cycle. It's a part of nature. It's a part of growth. And it's also a part of, you don't do something new. There's not a new beginning unless there's, an ending. There's not an open door unless there's a closed door. And so those times can be really scary. But I think we would be really bored if we just never had those things happen to us. I don't know. I would be. Anyway.
No, yeah. And I think it's part of growth. That has to happen as much as we kind of rail against changes. But if you think about it, nothing is stagnant. Things are always changing. As we're sitting here, there's change happening. Yeah. It's always happening. We can't escape from that. It's a constant evolution. And when you think about that, Lacey, are there things that come to mind that you would want in our society specifically, or even generally, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things that I would like to see because I think a lot of the times we are so busy. Yes. We are so occupied that we don't even know what we're feeling. We don't even know that we're not self-aware enough to know what's going on and what we need. I mean, how can we be, take care of ourselves if we don't know what we need? And we can't know what we need if we didn't slow down enough to know what's going on.
Yeah, we're on that treadmill. And I think you're right. And this is what's happened now, right? With COVID. I mean, people have been forced literally like, okay, you can't leave your house or you can't go to work. And I think that's been very tough because instead of being distracted, that we all are guilty of being distracted, we're having to face reality, look in the mirror, and do the whole self-awareness part that you're talking about. And it's not easy, but you're absolutely right. That's what's needed. That's like a first step for sure.
For sure. And I think basic income is a really good first step for that.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, if we have less anxiety around knowing our basic needs are going to be met, way different when it comes to being able to slow down and take a breath. And, I think arguably, Fromm would say this, that our number one need as human beings is love. And where do we get that? We don't get that from the tree. We don't get that from the brand new car that we just bought. We get it from people and from relationships. And we give that in the same way. And so if we don't have time for relationships,
no,
we're not going to be happy. And even happy is not the right word. We're not going to be the most satisfied, healthy, thriving human beings that we can be. And I think that also is a big part of why.
Yes, Lacey. That's why I talked to her. No, absolutely. I think love, you're right. Love is it. And unfortunately, people get caught up. They're trying to survive. They're just trying to get to work every day. Yeah. Like you said, they're trying to put food on the table. They don't have time to have a conversation with someone. They're just trying to get through the day. And I 100% am for basic income. I think that is definitely needed in our world. It allows you to have, I can breathe. I could actually like have a cup of coffee and look out the window for 2 minutes, Yes. It's ironic that that we're this first world country that has all this wealth, yet we can't even have some of these basic things.
Another thing that I like about basic income is what it would do for those that are in poverty and the homeless. And that is something I have noticed more since living in Atlanta. And I hate it. I think that people are valuable because they're humans. And why are we okay with just driving past people on the interstate that are begging food and hungry and might die in the winter overnight because it's just effing cold outside?
Right.
Right. I just don't understand that.
No, it's, what I think about when you tell me that, two things pop to mind. One is obviously I could be one of those people. I think any of us could say that. But the truth is there's the mental health issues. So some people need mental health, which we need to have. That's a whole nother subject, universal health care. But what I was going to say is think about the people that aren't homeless, but they're right at the edge of being homeless, but they're in domestic abuse or the kids are being abused, or they're just having to kind of tough it out in an environment they don't want to be in. So there's that whole segment along with your homeless. So that's a lot of people in our society that are suffering.
Yep. And just because it's not super visible doesn't mean those people and that suffering isn't out there. There's so much more of it than meets the eye. And it makes sense because when you turn on the television or you go on social media or you go on the internet, you don't see that. You see the advertisements of the people who, everything's happy and everything's great.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to piggyback on that with the healthcare. So obviously this is a real complicated subject, but this, generally speaking, I do feel we should all be entitled to healthcare, also mental health care. Right. And the interesting thing, I might have told you the story, but I had an issue. I have insurance through the Affordable Care Act, and I don't pay that much, but that's just because I don't make very much, so it's one of those things, which is ridiculous that we should all have it. But at the end of the day, I remember texting one day in a family chat about an issue I had with a bill. Every single person in the chat had some story to say, meaning the bureaucracy in the system to me is broken. And if everyone has similar stories, no matter what your economic status is, that tells you something. Yes. And then I'm thinking, what about people who don't even have insurance? So they can't go get help. Yep. And the reality is we make these decisions on, can I afford to go to the doctor? Yes. That's not a good society.
No, it's not a good. Do you think that more pandemics wouldn't progress out of a situation like that? I mean, it just is worse,
Right.
Way worse. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I just think along with the income, universal basic income, I do think we need to have things like preventative care, like what you're saying, being able to exercise or nutrition, or go to see a therapist or a counselor. Yes. Those bring so much value to people's lives.
Yes.
It's incredible. And it helps all of society.
Yes.
This is what I don't understand. It's, to me, so basic.
Yes. And one of the reasons I love, too, what Yang said, like the value of the economy is the unit of the economy is one human being. So if one human being is doing well, then that makes all of us do well, do better. So I think I totally agree. I remember telling you maybe a year ago, I was working out with a personal trainer. And I had not been active really in the gym previous. I've been a soccer player my whole life, but not really in the gym. And so I wanted to learn how to hold the correct form.
Right.
And I was like, you know what's sad? If I didn't have X amount of extra dollars a month to do this, there's no way I would be doing it. Like, how can, and what I said to Sonia at that point was, health is only for rich people. Like, you can be healthy only if you have money. And I'm not saying that I'm rich. What I'm saying is I have enough. But there's certain people that don't have enough.
Right.
And just can't be healthy to a certain extent because they're just not financially empowered in that way.
Right. And you value that. And someone else in your position might have 3 kids they have to feed, right? Or in a situation. So we don't know how the money is distributed. And this is why the basic income and the healthcare is like a no-brainer to me. That you have to start establishing a level field where people can rise up and they can have a quality of life.
Right.
Because we're not going to have that until we have our basic needs met. That's my belief.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll share this. There was one point in my life where a third of my budget monthly was healthcare.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty common.
Between healthcare, between, foods that are healthy, between those types of, you could categorize it as health, taking care of my own health. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's amazing. It's amazing how much money you can spend on it.
Right. And then I think I'll go back to what you said in the beginning of this podcast was the primitive societies. If you read about them, they will have done things where they're gathering food. They're I don't want to say meditate, but maybe it's meditation, but they're forms of like self-care. And they really value the things that we have to pay for and that are so expensive that we can't afford them. Like, you go back to the primitive societies and the way that they were living, you can see that the self-care of the human being was important within the community and the individual. Like, we just sort of say, no, it's not important. And I think, like you're saying about the advertisements, there's all these advertisements for medications. And so if you have a problem, take this. If you have a problem, take that. It really pulls away from where society, I think, should be as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The medications, just the massive amount of medications that there are, is startling. It's startling.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so those are definitely important things. I also think, I know you and I have talked about work. I think you discussed with me having like a 4-day work week.
Oh, yes. Yes. As far as envisioning an ideal society. Yeah. I mean, I think at the very most, I would suggest 4 days. I think I had mentioned to you like a 20-hour, like 20 hours a week, 25 at the most. Because I don't know. I need to look at what some of the studies are, but I imagine that we lose at least 3 hours of a work day to conversations, to lunch, to Facebook, whatever it is that distracts us. There's only so much of an attention span that we have.
I think there are statistics, like you said, that actually the number of hours. But what's interesting about your idea of the 4-day work week is that you have that downtime. Most people are even working, into the weekend. And
in the evening when they get home.
And exactly. So there's never like a separation between work and leisure, or even it just starts to bleed into all parts of your life. And we know that's the culture that really values, going out there and working every day, and even bragging about it, saying I worked 80 hours a week.
Right. I mean, we've talked about that before. And, even just the phrase work-life balance, some people are like, huh? What does that mean?
Yeah, they don't get it. But again, it's just because I think, number one, we've been sort of taught that's the drive, just go. But on top of that, I also think that a lot of people, as we said earlier, some of them are having to work.
Yes.
Especially like these essential workers, right? That are in the grocery stores or the pharmacy. They were talking about actually raising their wages. And it makes sense because they're on the front line also.
Yeah. And I mean, as we're talking about current events, we're going to kind of go back and forth between envisioning the ideal society and current events, but we can dip back into the COVID-19, which is in an interesting place right now, Sonia, because I think all of the states at this point have lifted certain restrictions, the stay-at-home orders, or at least partially reopened. I know Georgia, we're in Atlanta, and Georgia has gone back to, like, you can go in, restaurants and bars are now completely open. There are certain, standards and rules that you need to follow, social distancing, wearing a mask, et cetera, et cetera. But things are going back to normal in some ways. And I think there's a lot to be considering at this point based on that. Because it's early June. It's still early.
So I want to comment on that. I think it's really interesting, the psychology of what's going on. Number one, and I had this conversation with Lacey, COVID-19 is still out there. So we definitely have to be cautious and make good choices with the social distancing, the sanitizing, wearing the masks. But the comment I would make is I think we are social animals. So you're seeing this need to get together, even if it's at a park, sitting apart, even if it's outdoors, at some restaurant where they've got the tables separated. I believe that people have an innate need to connect. Yes. And so the challenge is you've got this rampant pandemic that you have to be cautious with and have fear, of course, a certain level of fear. But at the same time, you're trying to balance that with feeling like you're a human being.
Yes. And that is, I think, the challenge that we all face as we have come out of such an extreme lockdown and quarantine is we're human beings. We need each other. We thrive on interacting. And so we need that. And so it's finding the balance between, staying as isolated, for lack of a better word, or maybe not even isolated, just staying keeping our social circles smaller than we normally would, you know, and getting what we need from a social perspective, because it is a need. It's a legitimate need, and it is going to make people go insane if they're staying inside all the time. This is not long term. It's not.
No.
Yeah.
And I was going to tie it into the fact of the type of society, how we're imagining a better society. A better society is one that we have the time and the ability to connect with other people.
Yes.
And so all these things that we're talking about, we need to create a world that allows that and supports that.
So I have a funny story for you. So this morning I went to this place called Revolution Donuts.
I love it.
Really good donut place. Their donuts are fabulous and they're vegan, so I enjoy them. And it was funny because I was standing in line, and the lady who was actually in the store, I was waiting outside the store to go in, and the lady who was in there was asking about the hours. And they've only been open on the weekends for like 4 hours, and for a while now. And so the lady was like, yep, and in 2 weeks we're gonna go back to full-time hours. And I was like, whoa. I'm like, dang, man. 2 weeks? That's really fast. But my point in saying all that is that I think it's going to be a big shock to our systems to go back to the pace that we were before. Right. I think people are going to be like, wow, we're going really fast and really hard right now.
Right. And we'll have to see how that pans out with the with everything going on with how many people get COVID, because we know that it's not over. And I think that's it's really hard, I think, for one to accept that, because it's beautiful outside. And if you're doing social things and you're out there, it can kind of go in the back of your mind, but it's still there.
Yes.
And so there is this, it's ever evolving, that we don't know everything we need to know about it. We're learning it all the time.
Exactly. And I think that's the part that is hard right now, because it is exciting to see things opening again, to get to go see people and do things that we haven't been able to do. But at the same time, there's this thing in the back of my head that's like, what's going to happen in the fall? You know, what's going to happen in the winter?
Right.
And I'm hopeful that I'm wrong, but I'm scared that it might be pretty ugly. I don't, who knows? We don't know. We just don't.
Yeah. And I would say, trying to do this better society, look at what's happening now with the protests. I mean, obviously a lot of people are coming together. I don't know that they're all capable of doing the social distance when you're protesting. So I think that is telling us, because they're so desperate and also angry, and I get it. They're like, I don't care. I'm going to go out there and, you know, show my how I feel and protest and do what I need to do. But what does that tell you? We need a different society.
Yes, absolutely. It does.
It just reinforces where we're at, that we have to really, this is making us take a hard, long look at our world, the current world we're living in it. And it's not going to be overnight. It's going to be tough, but I really in my heart believe it will get better. We're going to go through some growing pains, but I do think I'm wanting to look at it optimistic from the long term.
Yeah, agreed. I believe that it is too, and it does feel to me a little bit different. The protests have been so wide scale. There have been so many videos of. I mean, it's so much easier to catch on film when police are not treating people right.
You're right. Now with the ability to catch all of that. Yeah,
I saw a lot of that this morning on the Twitter feed. And so I think that there's just enough people that are paying attention and are passionate, and we can see it so clearly now. I can't imagine that we don't see some changes happening after this.
It's definitely the power of the people. And I think I hope you're going to, well, not I hope, I believe you will see it. And I hope that people who feel this way, though, keep the pressure on.
We have to.
Yeah, we have to. And one of those ways, and I know because Lacey worked on a campaign, is voting. You have to be out there and, you know, your vote counts, which I know is like a slogan, but it does.
Right. And for anyone who's listening locally, the election here is next week on Tuesday. So is that correct? Tuesday
Yes.
the 9th? All right. All right. So please vote, everybody. Vote.
Vote. Yes.
Vote.
I'm going to be at one of the locations. Yeah, passing out PPE. But yes, super important. And I think also with envisioning a better society is, for some people, I know you and I, we have these visions, but for others, I think they're very afraid of the change, of anything changing, disrupting their world. And others are sort of more cynical, might say, I don't think that's possible. Like, that's just too out there, too radical. But look at where we're at today. Who could have imagined this?
Yeah, well, exactly. No one, if you said in 2019 at any point, 2020, you're going to see all these riots, you're going to see, a pandemic, and they're going to shut down the economy for at least a month.
Around the world, we would have said, that's not
the world, exactly.
And I think that's also, I've been listening to some other podcasts. I think that the reality that man has to come to is that we are just one species. There are multiple species, and we need to get with nature here, because I'm telling you, we're not going to win that battle. If it's nature against man, nature's winning.
Yes.
Which brings me back to the society. Until we as a society respect the fact that we're like visitors on this planet, literally, I think you're going to see it's inevitable. More viruses. It's part of what the world we're living in.
There's no question about it. When you disrupt ecosystems in the way that we are, it's going to keep happening. And, we have to start thinking about the cost of living the way that we're living, because what ends up happening is, these corporations and some businesses do damage to, and I mean, all of us as a society, we do damage to the ecosystems, to these natural processes of nature. And then we expect, that we're not going to have any consequences from it. I mean, it's it's insane. And then we end up paying the price for it.
Right. And exactly. We're disrupting it. And I'm going to just go back to what you said about primitive people.
Yeah.
I think they were living more one with nature.
Oh my God. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. There was a respect where we're just like, whatever, we'll just put concrete over there and put a building up.
Yeah. So true. Okay. So we are, if you're just joining us or you've just joined us, we are chatting about current events, ways that we envision our ideal society. We are the host of the Rethinking Humanity podcast. We started in early April. We just released our 4th episode. We have a bonus episode on the murder of George Floyd. Thanks to Victor for popping up anchor.fm/Rethinking Humanity. We are also on Spotify. We should be on iTunes or Apple Podcasts very soon, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, and so on. So wherever you find your podcast, just look for us, Rethinking Humanity. Also, this is a brand new YouTube channel we're launching. So this is part of why we decided to do a live episode here. You can also follow both of us on Instagram. Sonia is at Larea Sonia, and I am at Lacey Delane. And also, we're on Twitter. At RTHNG, Rethinking without any vowels, Humanity. That's our Twitter handle. And then, of course, I'm at Lacey Delane on Twitter. So we want to invite you to comment and share with us your thoughts on either what you think about what's going on right now in our society, and then also ways that you might envision our ideal society. We want to invite you to join in the conversation. Victor will just throw that up on the screen and we'll conversate with you. Hi, Adrian. Oh, hi. What's going on? We're so happy to have you.
Yeah, I know. We love hearing from our people out there.
Yeah.
Any comments, any questions, we're here for you.
Yeah, we want to hear. So, Adrian, let us know your thoughts on what's going on in the world today if you will, and if you would like. We will have some other episodes obviously coming up soon. We'll probably do some more lives like this. This is not considered a podcast. It's just a live. We'll probably do this through my Twitter account in the future. Whereas right now we're just on our YouTube channel. So, yeah.
So I have to apologize. I think I earlier said podcast, so I used the wrong terminology.
Don't worry, Sonia. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You're fired. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
We'll I've been looking for a reason to fire you.
Okay, now we got to rethink this thing.
Very well. Touche, sister.
But yeah, Lacey and I, of course, we can relate to each other a lot. All these topics that we're talking about, rethinking a better society, rethinking humanity, but we'd love to hear from you guys and love to hear what your responses or your ideas or your thoughts, or even, if you have criticisms, we're open to it, right?
Oh yeah, we always want to hear. That's one of the things that we love about our philosophy meetup group, which is how we met each other a couple years ago. People are very different. Everybody, and that's great because we love hearing, from all the different opinions. Feeling like a Luddite when you're called by name, I almost lose myself. Wow, I'm glad you didn't do that, Adrian. Your mic was not active, but we want to hear more about what you're thinking.
Absolutely. I know Adrian's with me on our Yang Gang, aka Humanity Forward. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Very, very cool. Rock on. So yes. So what else, Sonia, as far as envisioning an ideal society, what are some thoughts you've had?
I have another thought that you and I've discussed, not only on going back to the work. Remember, we discussed that in our culture, we think of work as, first of all, there's one thing. You pick something and then that's what you do. You become educated and you move forward. Instead of having the opportunity to learn many things and also to change throughout your lifetime. Now, I know we're living in a society, a culture right now that is actually having people, they're forced to change their jobs. But I would argue it's a little different because it's the gig economy and they're trying to survive. So they might have to go drive Uber. Nothing against driving Uber. Awesome. But at the end of the day, people should have opportunities to explore other interests.
Thanks, Adrian. He says, y'all got a great thing here. Sweet vehicle. Sweet.
Thank you, Adrian.
Adrian. Like you're saying, having the freedom to change and the financial ability.
And to learn. If we had an environment that allowed us to go at a different point in your life, hey, I'm learning, I want to be a graphic artist. Shout out to our friend Richard. I want to go be, work in the theater, or I want to go be an engineer, whatever. I don't know what specific it's going to be. But just at the end of the day, I think sometimes we're pigeonholed into this one space. And I think that doesn't utilize everyone's talents and abilities.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's a very risk-averse environment is what it ends up being right now, because it's like for you to make a change, it's a big risk. And if you change careers, you go to a career that you kind of start out, you're not going to be making the same amount of money as you are when you leave. It's just not built in a way that enables us to take risks in that way.
Universal basic income.
Basic income would make a big difference. And for folks who are like, well, basic income, people are just not going to work anymore.
No.
Well, listen, let me tell you something. If I had an extra $1,000 a month, I'd probably be finding a way to be entrepreneurial. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm not that entrepreneurial. I'm just not. And so there's a lot of people who are just like lacking a little bit of extra cash,
Oh yeah, I agree.
Let's talk.
Adrian wants to talk. Tell us something, Adrian. Give us your thoughts, comment, whatever, or even a question. We're here for you.
Yeah,
I agree with you, Lacey. We definitely need that ability, and you're right. I mean, if you're locked into something, it's very difficult to get out of that one career, that one space. And a society that doesn't measure work as all our self-worth and the basic income and healthcare would allow us to have more opportunities and more learning circumstances. Yeah.
And I would even venture to say like more satisfaction out of our life, more well-being, which I think is underrated, undervalued, you know. Yeah. But life satisfaction, you know, that kind of thing is, what are we living for? If we're not living for that, what's the point? Is it just to keep making a bunch of money?
Right.
Because that's number one, not everybody can do that. And number two, not everybody does that. And number three, it's not even possible for everybody to do that mathematically.
Right.
So what's the real point if it's not about really having some satisfaction, some well-being in our life?
Well, yeah, I'm going to have to plug Eric Fromm again and to have her to be, because exactly what you're saying is we need to be in this being mode instead of the having mode. The having mode is acquiring, having our car, having our new clothes, having a position. And that does not bring people the fulfillment that you're talking about. We need to go back to living in the being mode. We've pulled away from that in our society.
Yeah, we have. And I think one of the reasons I am so interested in the primitive societies is they were a lot better at living in the being mode of existence. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, take a listen to the podcast, specifically the last 2 episodes where we kind of dive deeper into what that is and what it means. Eric Fromm talks about how much we have become a very materialistic society, very production crazy, very consumption crazy, and we've lost the vision on kind of what we need as human beings, what are fulfilling our objective needs as human beings. That's gotten lost, and that's why we're all feeling really like passively depressed. Like we feel anxious, we feel like we're not happy. We don't know why, but we just can't put our finger on it, and that's a big part of it. We have stopped valuing the things that garner well-being in our lives.
No, I second that, Lacey. I think on the last podcast we had, you discussed how you can't have certain things. You can't have a sunset. Yes. You can't have, there's things that you experience and it doesn't, you're not able to, I see Adrian, sorry.
We have
I like him with the mask.
Hello. Audio testing. Hi.
Hey, Adrian, how are you?
What's going on?
Yeah, it's the end of a long day at work. I worked outdoors today in the rain.
Wow.
It did rain, yeah.
I was just thinking about all the beans that I got planted in the yard, so it's all good.
That's good. That's good. So they're getting some good rain, good watering, huh?
Yeah, that's you know me. I always look on the bright side of a cloud.
Oh my gosh!
Tell us what
I called in, because Sonia mentioned, he's working with us on that thing, and so I thought I could, mention just a little bit about the Atlanta UBI project.
Okay,
is that all right?
Go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I can only skim along the surface because that's about all I could really say. I'm not in that leadership position, but we formed a board, and we're going through the steps to become a source of UBI, a solid rock of UBI here in Atlanta, in Georgia, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. We love that you're a part of that, Adrian.
It's been a real pleasure. Kind of pulled me out from under a rock. Let's see, out of my cave.
I think a lot of us have been in a cave, right? Through COVID.
Yeah. It's easy to stay there. That's for sure.
Yeah. Hunker down, right?
Yeah. Thank you for what you are doing for basic income. We need it.
We need everybody on board, and you're one person, one other person that's helping us get there.
You said it, Sonia, for sure. Yeah, so anyone listening, pretty soon we'll have ways of connecting, but right now, this is that way. Let's just keep this chat going and grow this conversation, because there's got to be a positive offset to some real scary looking stuff.
I know. Yeah,
for sure. And do you, other than basic income, do you have any ideas for a way that you could envision an ideal society? What would be different?
Well, I like watching what Andrew's problem-solving type position, Andrew Yang's problem-solving position has been. So work, but it's been an incremental system ways. You know, he proposes within legislation. It's not a framework destroyer. It's a, you know, it's a reframing of our societal rules. And over a generation, those then become the social norms, and we begin to be that better society. The Republic idea is wonderful. And of course, we go through these waves of human nature where hot-headed people take control of those wheels for nefarious purposes and da 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 da. And so we're in that chapter of the Avengers movie right now. But anyway,
right.
The Republic stands, you know, as in terms of how rules may apply to our lives if we use it, if we create our own rules, right? We call them laws, la la la. So I have a proposal as a 26th Amendment that creates a General Assembly, a third house of legislation, that allows the people to have an immediate voice on all legislation passing through and have a direct statistical and also individual offering to the executive branch when the executive has to decide to sign or to veto, to know what the people really think.
Right.
Know.
I like the word that you used of social norms. I could see how that that's going to play into, like you say, a generation, because we're living now in an environment that there's a different perspective on those social norms. So that's definitely
for sure. Yeah. Thank you for calling in, Adrian.
Yeah,
we hope you have a good
awesome. And thank you for being part of Atlanta UBI.
Yeah, I'll be seeing all y'all soon. I hope. I love Atlanta.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. We have Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, how are you all?
Good.
How are you all?
Good to see you.
So I'm actually also a member of the Atlanta UBI project. I'm the treasurer, so that's really awesome.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that.
Yeah, we are. So hopefully, I'll be the one helping budget everything, give people money.
So, what's your idea, Eric, for a better society?
Well, as Dr. King said, I wrote this YouTube comments. We need to become a people society rather than a things-based society. And I jumped on around the time you were actually discussing materialism, and I thought it was a very, especially since like I've been around a lot of materialistic people myself, so it's been really interesting. It's like people who are interested in materials, and then you meet people who are interested in people. And it's really the people who are interested in people that matter the most.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that.
I enjoy those people the most, I think. The ones who are interested in people.
Yeah, because they always have the most interesting conversations.
That's very true. I'm writing that down. Remember that.
Well, thanks for calling in and videoing in, Eric. It's great to see you, and we hope you have a great evening.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thanks, Eric. We appreciate you.
Love it whenever we get visited by people.
Oh my God. Yeah, they had some great thoughts, great ideas.
And Victor's, back there making all the magic happen, bring people into the show, and that's stuff that I am wanting to do, But he's good at it. He's so good at it.
He is.
Very good. Very good. So one thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, I thought about talking about tonight, Tonya, was, I don't know if you saw this video, but I saw it this morning. I know there are a lot of people who've seen it just from seeing the tweets, but there was an older gentleman. I don't know exactly where this was, but it was at one of the protests. I'm assuming yesterday. Man in his 70s, who it looked like what he was doing was bringing one of the police officers or SWAT team or whatever helmet and trying to give it back to them.
Oh, really?
It was heartbreaking to see this.
Oh, wow.
So he walks up and he tries to give this to the
helmet? Yeah.
Yes. And they told him to back off, and then they pushed him.
Oh,
and
my
then
gosh.
he fell back and hit his head. You can hear the audio of it.
Oh, wow.
It's awful. And then you see him start to bleed.
That's
I'm
horrible.
like, wow. It's heartbreaking.
There we which I touched on earlier was we need reform. There needs to be reform in these authoritarian environments such as the police. And that's an example. And like you said, now that we have recordings, people can video all of this. So you can't, sweep it under the rug. And I think, I'll tell you what was heartbreaking for me was, which that's an awful story Lacey was seeing. I think it was on Instagram too, where a young African-American guy, probably teenager or 20s, is saying how he's raised, what he has to do, like don't talk back, be quiet, be submissive, don't challenge. I mean, this incredible list of things that you have to do to stay alive. It's amazing that you, as an individual, you have to completely basically shut down, just be standing there and not react.
Yeah.
So sad.
It is sad.
And so unfair.
It's super.
You lose your voice. You can't challenge. You can't question. Everything has to be just accepting guilt when you're not guilty because of the fear of you're going to be attacked. You could lose your life.
I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a very healthy society to me.
No.
Quiet,
and I think it's impossible for me to understand that because I haven't had those experiences. But these people, specifically, African-American males, live with that every single day. Yes. So this is why we are having these protests. This has been going on. This isn't a one-time incident, by the way.
Right. Over decades and decades. I mean, this has happened years and years. 40s, it was happening. 50s. I mean, come on, man. And before that, it was worse.
And colonialism.
Yes.
Slavery. I mean, it just goes. That's what I was saying about learning the history. I think has not been taught appropriately. And yeah, this has just been building and building, and people are done. They're done.
One thing that I've heard that I think is very interesting, I heard this morning, was that there's a lady who was talking about reframing the issue, and it's becoming more about white people realizing that the privilege that we have,
yes,
and us learning what we need to learn in order to bring justice and change these things in the system that are so broken. And I think that is brilliant and absolutely right, because, I think it'd be quite a challenge for the oppressed to be the ones who change the way that the system is.
I agree. She's right about the reframing, and that's why I do think it's important to be exposed to literature and experiences and hear and listen. Don't put one's opinion. We need to be listening.
Yes.
We really can't be the ones saying, oh, this is the way it's going to be. Or, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. No. At the end of the day, no. We have to be the silent, not silent as far as protesting, but silent as far as respecting the other and hearing their story.
Yes. And that is powerful when you see, I know there were certainly stories of cops who were like, we're listening. I know the Atlanta police chief, like the first night of the protest, she's like, we know you need to be heard. Right. Here we are, we're listening. And that is exactly what it is. We need to effing listen, man.
And I was going to say compassion. When you brought up the police, I've also seen some other images of, and it's just so moving, where a police officer hugs, a kid at this protest, and that you can see the breakdown. There's this connection. There's been moments where the officers are kneeling, and in silence and in reverence to the protesters. So I just want to throw that out there because I don't want to generalize, but I know we have a lot of reform to do. And there's people out there trying. And so that's why this makes it complicated, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yes, I don't have, specific ideas around what we can do with reform for police. But I know there are people out there that do. And if you're listening, we'd love to hear from you. But I think that's one thing that we could spend more time and effort around is imagining ways, part of why we wanted to do this, ways that we could have like the most ideal society. What would that look like? One other thing idea that I have, like the most ideal society, there are no cars, period. I hate cars.
Okay.
Because
that'd be great if we had railway or.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Railways. Look, can we just have a bunch of trains that are high speed like they do in Europe and get us where we need to go?
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
Dude, because how many people needlessly die because of car accidents? I don't understand. And you know what cars do? They just cost us money.
Right. That's true. That's true. And they pollute the environment. Now that people haven't been in their cars, a lot of cities around the world have the pollution has gone way down. So that tells you something.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So we could get rid of cars. That'd be totally fine with me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Let's do something different.
I'm all about that. I'm all about a more egalitarian society. I think, we're not going to get into the female male thing, but we definitely need an environment that everyone has, equal rights, equal pay, etc. And that's a whole nother conversation. But no matter your race, your gender, all of that, we need to be. That's what we need to be for our societies to thrive.
Yep, absolutely, we do. Well, we have been at it for an hour, so
have we? Yeah, wow, it goes by so fast.
It does. I know.
Oh my gosh.
But it's been great. So thank you guys for watching, listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And what do we have going on next? Next, we're going to do another one of these at some point. We'll put out an episode when we're ready.
Yeah, exactly.
But we promise it'll be quality. So don't worry about that. And guys, stay safe. Take care.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, no, just thank everybody for listening. Thanks for supporting us on Rethinking Humanity. And again, we'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts, any ideas? Tell me book recommendations. I'm a big reader.
We always want to know that. And of course, the podcast is anchor.fm/rethinking humanity. Check it out. Thank you guys so much for being here, for supporting. Show some love to your brother, whoever you see. Pay it forward. Yes. Do something nice for somebody.
Yes,
definitely. It all creates a positive atmosphere around. And we'll see you guys very soon. Also, Victor, you are awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Victor. Thank you, Lacey. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sonia. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.